Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Mary Kelly, psychologist at Counseling and Psychological Services, also known as CAPS. I'm here today with my colleague, Dr. Julie DiMatteo, who you'll meet in a moment. But first, I'm going to just explain a little bit about what we're doing today. Today's topic is crisis survival skills. In other words, how do we get through difficult situations without making the situation worse? Now, the current pandemic has certainly presented us with a crisis. You think about all the abrupt changes that have had to happen recently, all the uncertainty about the future, it makes sense that we are in crisis. But on the other side of crisis is opportunity. We also have an opportunity to learn how to be skillful, not only in this situation, but any difficult situations we may encounter in the future. So crisis survival skills are really about tolerating painful events, painful emotions in the moment when there is nothing else that you can do. Because when you think about it, there's no amount of individual problem solving, no amount of willpower that's going to get rid of this pandemic right now. Or this situation is painful, and that's the reality. And in fact, if we try to fight that reality, we only end up making ourselves more stressed and more anxious. So today then, we're going to be teaching you skills that will enable you to tolerate what's happening in an effective way that doesn't make your life or the lives of those around you even worse. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. DiMatteo.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. DiMatteo, and I'm going to today be talking about our crisis survival skills. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about how we can effectively distract from the moment. And to help you remember the skills we're going to learn today, we're going to present a series of acronyms. Now, big caveat to this, Dr. Kelly and myself did not make these acronyms. Some of them are a little funky and some of them a little bit odd. And so we want to make sure it's really clear we're adapting these from a therapy called dialectical behavior therapy. And so when you're looking at it and thinking, who made this acronym? No, it wasn't us. But the reason we present acronyms is that when we're in a situation that's really stressful, our brain is just overcome with emotions, and it can be really difficult to remember what can I do right now in the moment. And we know acronyms help us facilitate a way of remembering the different skills we can use. Now, before I talk about the specific skills, I want to talk about distraction. Distraction often gets a really bad rap. When we think about distracting, we mean turning our attention away from the thing that's causing us stress and anxiety. We tend to think of distraction and avoidance as a bad thing, and often people distract with things that are ineffective, like substances or complete avoidance of a task. Here we're trying to really distract from the moment in a way that helps to bring down the intensity of the emotion and to buy ourselves time until we can more effectively deal with what it is we need to deal with. We really want to try to be as effective as possible to prevent us from engaging in a way that can actually be more harmful. So we're going to go over ways today to mindfully distract in what we call an effective way. Now, the skills we're going to talk about are going to seem really obvious, and that's okay. But oftentimes these obvious things feel really difficult to do, and we feel that we don't have the permission to do it. We get really laden in shoulds of what I should be doing differently or what I should be doing instead. So think of this skill as a means of thinking of ways to effectively distract, as well as giving you permission to take a break, to distract for a moment, and pause on dealing with the stressors in front of you. The first way that we talk about distracting is with activities. And so these are examples of things you enjoy: exercising, engaging in a hobby, cleaning, playing a video game, watching TV, or watching a movie. We want to engage in activities that occupy our short-term memory, and we want to do something that is going to fully consume us. Now, being on social media, being on our phone, or even watching a movie while we're still thinking about the stressful situation, that's not distraction. That's not what we're talking about here. That's still engaging with the stressor. That still can increase our anxiety or our stress in the moment. Instead, what we're talking about is mindfully engaging in an activity. It's kind of engaging with our mind, body, and soul, so to speak. By throwing ourselves completely into the activity, we're going to truly distract from the pain that we're in the moment. It can be really helpful to do this in a way by turning everything off. Turn off all your electronic devices. If you're going for a run, leave your phone at home. If you're going to try to watch a movie or you're going to try to watch TV, do so in a spot in your house that's as less distracting as possible. Now, I know that can be really difficult, and this is kind of the ideal at the time, but the key is whatever activity you pick to do, you only are using that one activity. You're not multitasking, you're not doing anything else. So the first is activities. Our next one is contributing. And the skill here is really meaning to do something for someone else or for the world to take your mind off the crisis. So contribution can look a lot like volunteering. And this doesn't always have to be in person. You can contribute to a political campaign on your computer. You can volunteer through different organizations online. There's a lot of opportunity right now to contribute and give back to healthcare workers, to different individuals and essential workers. And so contributing feels both good for us and is doing something to help the best we can in the crisis situation. This can also be something really simple. It doesn't have to be a big grand gesture. It can be calling and reaching out to family and friends, just checking in on a neighbor and seeing how they're doing. Even writing little cards to people or sending emails, just letting know others you're thinking about them. Anything that can take your mind off of the situation while doing something good or something nice or caring for another person goes into contributing. And again, it doesn't have to be something big. It can be even helping your parent with something around the house or helping a classmate that maybe is struggling with some work right now or learning something in the online format. Again, the idea of contributing is to both give back while also making ourselves feel like we're giving something to the community. Our next skill is going to be comparisons. Now, before I even explain this skill, I want to really acknowledge that this skill is one that either people use a lot or they hate it and they never use it. There's some value in it, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But with all the skills we're learning here today, the idea is to take what works for you and leave the rest behind. You don't have to use all of these. Not all of these are going to appeal to you, and not all of these are going to work in the moment. So the idea is just to kind of find what might feel like something you're interested in trying. The idea with comparison is to take the focus off yourself by comparing yourself to people that are coping the same or less well than you. So for example, you might say in this situation that this feels really stressful, but at least I live somewhere where there's medical help available, or at least I'm in good health and I have a good chance of surviving this. As you can see, the reason why some people hate this skill is because it can make us feel guilty comparing ourselves to someone who's less fortunate. And I think I can understand that, right? It doesn't always feel good. It kind of feels like we're putting someone down at our own expense, and that doesn't always feel the best. At the same time, it's really natural to try to say to ourselves, I'm doing the best I can. This might not be as bad as I think I am doing. It's also really natural to compare ourselves to people doing better than us, right? It's kind of like our first reaction is to think of, well, they're doing it better than me, or they're having an easier time, or they don't seem as affected. And so if we're really going to compare, the idea is to also think about, well, there's others also struggling more than me. There's others that are having a harder time. And to kind of put ourselves somewhere in the middle can feel a lot better than putting ourselves at the bottom level. Again, this is a skill, take it or leave it. It depends on where you are and how you can use it. Now, our next skill is with emotions. And here we're trying to do something that elicits different emotions than what you're feeling. For example, if right now you're feeling fear and anxiety, or you're feeling sadness, something we might do is a relaxation exercise, something that's the opposite of anxiety to really calm our system. If we're feeling sadness, we might watch a comedy special, something that would make us laugh and make us feel a different emotion than what we're feeling right now. Listening to a news podcast would not be a good example. Watching a sad movie, these are all things that can increase the emotion we're feeling rather than bringing it down. Remember, our goal with distract is to do something to bring down the intensity of the emotion so that we have the energy and resources to better deal with the crisis and situation at hand. If we're doing something to increase the intensity of the same emotion, we're not going to be able to then effectively manage our situation. So we want to do something that elicits the opposite emotion or a different emotion. We can't do the opposite, maybe just something different than what we're feeling right now. So for example, if you're listening to music and you're feeling sad, you might want to listen to really energetic music. The idea is to first figure out what emotion am I experiencing? And that can be really hard to do, especially when we're overwhelmed by several emotions at this time. And so just take a moment and kind of pause when you're feeling a strong emotion. Think about where you feel it in your body. What are some of the thoughts going through your mind? Try to figure out what it is that I'm feeling. In order to be able to do the opposite, you need to know what you're feeling first. So as soon as you kind of have a general idea of what you're feeling, even if you just know how you're feeling in your body, it's going to help you identify activities you can do to feel the opposite of what you're feeling. Our whole goal with this one is to just elicit a different emotion. It's kind of trying to break the energy of the current emotion, again, to kind of replenish ourselves so we have more resources to deal with the difficulty at hand. All right, our next skill is going to be pushing away. This means mentally putting the situation in a box on a shelf and coming back to it at a later time when we're more ready to deal with it. Now, some people are really good at this. Some people might be so good at this that it actually can be really interfering in their lives. The trick with this skill is we can't overuse it. And something that can be really hard with this skill is knowing when am I overusing it. The thing we want to remember here is we can't dig a hole in the sand, stick our heads in there, and just stay there the rest of our lives. So if we're going to choose to use this skill, I highly recommend using a timer. The idea is to say, I'm going to set a timer for, let's say, an hour. And for this hour, I'm just not going to think about the situation at hand. I'm literally going to push it away and return to it at a later time. Now, naturally, our mind is probably going to go back to that situation. That's going to happen, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you're using the skill wrong or you're not doing it right. It's just the way our mind works. If our thoughts go to the situation that's causing us stress, we just take a break, acknowledge that the thought is there, and re-engage in something to help us maybe use an activity here to distract or to push the situation away. We're going to come back to it at another time, and the situation is still going to be there if it's that big of a stressor. And so really here, we're just trying to take a break, replenish our resources, and give ourselves some time from feeling really stressed and anxious. Again, this skill can be really easy to fall into the trap of never coming back to what we have to do. And so we want to make sure that we're setting a timer if it is something we have to come back to. If it's something more like this pandemic where it's global and it's going to always be there, pushing away can simply just look like taking a break and not giving ourselves the time to not think about it and to not be reliant on whatever emotions we're feeling at that time. Remember, it's a short-term skill. And when you're feeling really stressed and anxious, our minds are working in overdrive, and it can make it really hard for us to figure out the best thing to do. And so pushing it away gives you some time to try to figure out what could I do differently, or what could I do instead to make this easier or more effective for myself. This one can also be really difficult to give ourselves permission to do. And so part again of this skill is again giving the idea of like, this is okay to do. You need to do this to be able to survive this situation and to be able to get through it effectively. Our next skill is thoughts. And so when we're stressed and we're anxious, our mind is in just an overdrive state. And we tend to get flooded by our thoughts, and these thoughts can feel uncontrollable. Sometimes they're coming at us in such rapid fire, it feels like we have nothing to do or we have no way of controlling them. So one way to effectively distract is to do something with your thoughts, to engage in some kind of mental activity. So for example, here we could do a crossword puzzle. We could use Sudoku. We could read an interesting book, something to really engage our thoughts and our mental energy right now. Sometimes it can be really hard to have access to these things, right? So it might be something that we don't have at our disposal. You can always do something to take your mind off the situation. Example might be picking a color. So for example, I'm going to pick the color blue, and I'm going to look around my room and the area I'm in, and I'm going to count and see how many things that are in that space that are the color blue. Another great one is what we call serial sevens. The idea of serial sevens is you pick a random number and you count backwards in increments of 7. So for example, I pick 1065. I'm going to go down to 1058, and I'm going to keep counting down in increments of 7. And if I make a mistake, I'm going to have to start back at my number. It's a good way of just kind of occupying our thoughts so our thoughts can't wander back to the stressful situation. Again, we want to do something that takes our full attention away from focusing on the stressor at hand and gives us a healthy, effective way of distracting from the moment. And the last one in our accept skill is sensations. And so here we're trying to do something safely that elicits intense sensations in our body. An example is holding ice in our hands. So for instance, when you first grab an ice cube, let's say out of the freezer, those first few seconds, it doesn't really hurt. You don't really feel anything. But if you do it for longer, you start feeling the intense sensation of the coldness in your hand. Other examples can be squeezing a stress ball, taking a hot or cold shower. The goal here is to try to bring our body into it and to give us some distraction. Sensations can also look like doing something nice for ourselves. So again, if we're using all five senses, it might be smelling essential oils that are calming to us. It might be eating something that is comforting to us. Here we're using our senses to really try to calm our system and give our body a break from what's going on. Again, in the safest way possible. Now, all these skills seem really basic, and the reason we use the acronym ACCEPTS here is because we really need with our mind to accept the fact that this is a situation that, like Dr. Kelly said before, no willpower, no problem solving is going to change the situation at hand. And instead, what's happening is my greater focus on it is actually causing me more distress. It's causing me more anxiety, more sadness, more isolation. And so we use these skills to accept the moment that we're in, accept that right now I can't use my other skills to tolerate it. And so instead, I'm going to do something to distract, to give myself a break from the situation. The goal of giving ourselves this break is to give us time to replenish, to bring down the emotion, and for us to then be able to come back and engage in our lives in an effective way. All these skills should be used for a short period of time. They're not meant to be long-term. They're not meant to be used over and over so that we're avoiding the situation. It's meant to be used temporarily to distract and help us replenish so that we can come back to it. Now, while they all seem really basic, it can be really challenging to find time or to give ourselves permission or to know what to do in the moment. So something I'd like you all to do is just take a moment as we transition to the next slide and identify 2 of these things that you think you could try over the next day to try to give yourself a break from the crisis at hand. So just take a mindful moment and think about what 2 distracting techniques that we talked about might be of interest to you. And again, if you forget the skill after, you can always put accepts as a skill into Google search and you can find more information on it. You can also email myself or Dr. Kelly and we're happy to give you more information on it. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kelly and she's going to talk about our next skill to help us with moments of crisis.
Okay, thank you. Our next set of crisis skills is our improve the moment skills. Now, these skills are also intended to help you distract from your stressors. Now, whereas the accept skills are activity-based, the improve skills are more about doing something with the present moment to lessen how bad it is. Many of these skills are about creating a different reality in this moment or changing the nature of your reality in the moment. So the first skill in this set is called imagery. Now, imagery refers to imagining in your own mind a more relaxing scene. For example, you could imagine whatever is your happy place, whether it's a beautiful beach at the Jersey Shore, going for a hike, maybe it's even a room in your house where you feel particularly comfortable. The idea is to go into that image, not only your mind when you're feeling stressed, but also play around with the space in your head. Picture using your five senses. What does this scene look like? What sounds do you hear? What smells are you aware of? Are there certain tastes or touch that's associated with this space? Now, it doesn't even have to be a real place. It could be make-believe. It could be your dream home. It could be a real place that is special for you, a place that you visited. Now, if you don't want to imagine yourself in a scene like that, you can also use imagery to imagine things going well, or imagine yourself coping well in the current situation. You can imagine how the next couple of weeks and months could turn out in a way that feels fine to you, feels calming, without crisis. Now, a word of caution about this skill. Some people seem to be able to do this really well, really easily, to be able to use their imaginations in this way. And for other people, not so much. For other people, it might seem very difficult, and that's pretty common. So again, as Dr. DiMatteo was saying earlier, if you find this skill to be difficult, we'll just move on to the next. Remember, we're just offering you a menu to explore, decide what works best for you, given the situation that you're in. All right, moving on then, our next improved skill is called meaning. Here you're saying to yourself, well, if I'm going to go through this, at least I'm going to try to derive some meaning out of it. You've heard the phrase before, if life hands you lemons, you make lemonade. That's what applies here. It's saying to yourself, there is something that I can get out of this crisis, and I am going to find some meaning in it. If you don't find meaning, if I don't find meaning, I'm going to accept that there is some sort of a meaning index. In other words, the idea that this crisis is providing for me a recognition of what are the things that are most important to me. Who are the people who are most important to me? What are the things I most value? And apparently people really value toilet paper right now. I'm not sure that that's really the meaning of this crisis, but you get the idea. What are sometimes the absence of people in our lives or the absence of activities in our lives really make them stand out as being very important to us. You could even say, if none of these meaning activities work, you could even say, I'm learning that even when I'm stressed, even when there's a world crisis happening, I can feel in control of certain things. I can take care of myself. I can take care of people and my work. And the next skill is prayer. And really meaning segues into this skill. This can be finding a connection to your religious or spiritual values as a form of making meaning out of the situation. For some of you, prayer is a vital part of your life already, and you could use the skill to turn things over to God. For others who are not so religious, you can adapt this to pray to many things. It doesn't have to be to God. You could pray to your own sense of wisdom. You could pray to open your heart to a greater wisdom. You can pray asking for strength. Whatever works for you. Our next skill is relaxation. Now, you may already know many different kinds of relaxation. We've covered these in previous weeks of our Cultivating Calm workshops too. Some examples would be like deep breathing or mindful breathing or progressive muscle relaxation. On the CAPS website, we have audio files on our homepage for you to listen to. If you click on our resources and hotlines link, we also have additional information about web pages and apps you can download for relaxation. Now, this doesn't need to be a long activity. You can just sitting for a few minutes and breathing deeply can be a good way to reset yourself. If you don't have time for that, even 3 deep breaths can help to recenter you. If you do have time, you can also engage in relaxing activities like taking a bath or bubble bath, having a hot cup of tea, sitting in a comfortable chair, reading a book that you enjoy. The focus here should be on doing one thing in the moment that relaxes you, or one thing to make this moment less painful. And speaking of the one thing, the next skill is about doing one thing in the moment. This is a mindfulness skill. When we're in crisis and experiencing high degrees of stress, our minds are in 1,000 places at once, and it can feel overwhelming knowing what to do and how to balance everything. The idea here is to attend to one thing at a time. This means turning off phone notifications, putting your electronic devices down, focusing on one task with our full attention. For example, if you're washing dishes, I don't know how far back I cut my mic out there, so I'll just go over this one thing in the moment. Does that sound good? Yeah, that sounds good. Oh, I was washing dishes. Okay. If I'm washing dishes, I'm just washing dishes. If I'm in conversation, I'm just conversing. I'm not checking my phone. I'm not thinking about all the things I have to do later. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say next, which is a trap that many of us fall into when we're having a conversation. Now, it's not to say that our minds won't wander. They absolutely will, because that's what minds do. But when they do, all we need to do is notice that our mind has wandered and bring it back to the moment, bring it back to that one thing that we're doing in the moment. Our next skill is vacation. Wouldn't it be nice to go on a real vacation right now? The idea is to give us a brief vacation from our stressors, because it's not likely that many of us are going on vacation at this time. But we can take breaks during the day. You could even just spend 20 minutes just lying down, doing nothing, just taking in a break that doesn't hurt ourselves or those around us in some either short-term or the long-term way. Now, it is similar to the pushing away skill that Dr. DiMatteo covered just a little bit ago. We may want to set a timer. When the timer goes off, go back to our responsibilities. We just want to have a little breather from everything we have going on, a way of just refreshing ourselves. The last skill that we have under the improve the moment skills is encouragement. We're sort of acting as our own cheerleader here. We're cheerleading ourselves with encouraging phrases. Now, the best way to generate these things, because we tend to all be so tough on ourselves, think about what would you say to a friend in this situation? And maybe phrases like "this too shall pass," or "I can withstand this for a little longer," or "you're doing the best you can given the circumstances" are examples. We can repeat these phrases to ourselves until we feel calmer or a bit more willing to engage with our stressors. So those are our improved skills. And as we've said before, it takes time and practice to give ourselves permission to use these skills. Again, they might seem pretty basic, as Dr. DiMatteo was saying earlier, but we need to find time to practice them, give ourselves permission to use them, find the balance of skills that work best for us. It's not one size fits all. And as we did with our last set of skills, let's just take a moment here, a mindful moment, to write down 2 of these things from this list that you could practice right away. And with that, we return to Dr. DiMatteo.
Okay, so in the skills we were just talking about, we were talking about what to do with the moment, how to distract, and how to create a different reality from the current moment. These are the skills we use when we're faced with overwhelming stress, to distract from the situation until our anxiety, stress, or whatever emotion we're feeling comes down to be able to make us comes down enough so that we can effectively deal with the situation. These skills also help us tolerate the situation and the uncertainty that surrounds it without making the situation worse. The next set of skills we're going to talk about are a little different. So these are what we call our emotion regulation skills. And the goal of these skills is to decrease our vulnerability to intense emotions. So here we're trying to create a buffer from stressors so that when crises arise, we have the strength and resources to deal with them. When we talk about the distract and the improve the moment skill, we're really talking about things to do when the crisis hits. When we talk about the next set of skills, we're really talking about things we can do on a daily basis throughout the day to help us have more resources and to have a greater buffer for when stressors arise. So again, the skills we just talked about are for use when they're in the crisis. These skills are something we should be doing on a daily basis. Now, while the other 2 acronyms seem straightforward, this is where we go a little bit off the deep end. And so now we're going to use what's called our A-B please skills. So it doesn't roll very nicely, but again, it's just a way to help you remember them. And the first skill we're going to talk about is accumulating positive experiences. One of the things happening to all of us right now is that we're facing greater demands in this changing environment, which can make it really difficult to find both the time and energy to do things we enjoy. However, engaging in pleasant activities is critical to creating a buffer from negative emotions, as well as for giving us a break from our stressors. We often think when we're under stress and we have a lot going on our plate, the first thing we get rid of are our hobbies or exercising or doing something that's enjoyable for us. Accumulating positive experiences is mandatory at this time. You need time in your day to do something you enjoy. Otherwise, you're going to burn out and you're not going to have the resources and the ability to deal with what you have going on. Again, we need to give ourselves permission to take a break and to do something that's fun for us. Pleasant activities can be anything that's safe and effective at this time. So it can bring anything that brings us joy, like a hobby, taking a walk, going for a run, whatever it is that's pleasant for you. If you're having a really hard time thinking of pleasant activities, you can email myself and Dr. Kelly, and we actually have just a list of over 200 pleasant activities that people can pick from. Something else that can be really helpful is to think about, what did I enjoy before this crisis? What is something that I did that was fun? What was something that was pleasant for me? And try to find time in your new routine to do those activities. Similar to the activities distracting skill we talked about, accumulating positive experience is really doing something that you enjoy. And this way we're using it differently. Before we're talking about it as a means to distract. Here we're talking about it every day for at least a half hour, an hour a day to give ourselves a buffer from stressors. Now, one of the other things we want to do to help, again, build that buffer around stress is called building mastery. So in addition to engaging in pleasant activities, we also need to engage in activities that make us feel good and bring about a sense of accomplishment, a sense of mastery, a sense of just that we're skilled at something. In this changing environment, many of us are faced with different challenges, and we're forced to learn and engage in ways that are unfamiliar. This can make us feel really insecure and really incompetent, and it increases our susceptibility to feeling anxious, to feeling sad, and to feeling isolated. One of the things that I'm hearing from a lot of students is that this online format is really different than learning in class, and it presents a whole different challenges for both how you learn the material and how you execute your assignments. One of the things we're talking about with building mastery is that it can make us feel like we're doing something wrong or we're not good at it, instead of recognizing that this is just a new skill and you need time to be able to build your sense of mastery around this new skill. You're doing the best you can with it, and that can feel really hard. So something that we can do during this time to help, again, create this buffer from crisis is to engage in other activities that make us feel really good and bring us a sense of competency. This can be something really small, like cleaning up the house or finishing a homework assignment. It can be something really simple in your day, right? So I always give the example that I hate loading the dishwasher, but I'm really effective at it. And I'm way better at it than my husband. So it's our joke in our house, because maybe where he fit 4 bowls, I can fit 8. Now, this brings me no joy. It is not the skill I'm going to put on my resume, but it is something that I feel good at. And I walk away and think, I got that done. I feel accomplished. It's over. And in a little bit of a sense of comparison, I did it better, right? And so one of the things we want to do here with building mastery is find some tasks that just make us feel accomplished, especially if we're getting overloaded by tasks that make us feel like we're not accomplishing anything. So we want to have a good balance in our day of tasks that are challenging, right? Because if everything's so easy, we're going to be bored, we're not going to have the motivation, and we're not going to want to do anything. So we need a little bit of challenge, but we also want to have some tasks in our day that we feel really good at, tasks that we walk away from and think, okay, I did that and I did it well. If we don't have enough of those tasks, we're going to have to add them to our day. So similar to accumulating positive experiences, look through your day and try to embed opportunities to feel a sense of mastery. Again, this is a skill that needs to be done daily, not a skill that's done once we're in the crisis. We're trying to create that buffer from the crisis. So these are things that we can do activity-wise that we can kind of schedule within our day to help give us that buffer. The next set of skills that we're going to talk about are how we can take care of our body and our physical needs during this time to prevent ourselves from just having more what we call emotion dysregulation, more susceptibility to experiencing intense unwanted emotions. So the purpose of these skills are going to be how we can take care of ourselves in crisis. When we're in crisis, sticking to a routine, having structure in our day, that can be a great thing to help reduce some of our vulnerabilities. And we know that the human mind and body need structure and that they work really well together. So what we're going to talk about now is how we can take care of our body during crisis in a way that's going to help us deal with it better. And so the first thing feels really straightforward, but can be really hard, especially at a time like this. So the first thing is to treat physical illness. If I'm sick, I need to prioritize rest. I need to prioritize getting medical attention so I can recover. If I take a daily medication, I want to make sure that I'm taking them at the right time each day and as prescribed. One of the things with physical illness right now is that we might be afraid to go to the doctor, especially with everything going on. We don't want to neglect our physical health. If we're not feeling well, we want to reach out to our doctor, see what our options are. If we're feeling really run down, we need to rest. We need to do things to give ourselves a break from it. And this is something we need to check in with ourselves every day. How am I feeling? It's a basic question, but not one that we often ask ourselves. So each day, if we just check in and think, how is my body feeling? Do I need to rest? Am I feeling any kind of cold coming on or anything coming on that I need to take care of? It's treating our body first, because we're not going to be able to attend to all our activities. We're not going to have the resource to deal with crises when they arise if our body's not there with us. The next one is to just eat regular, balanced meals. And this can be really challenging with the change in our living environments, especially if we're in an area where there's different resources or different availability of foods. One of the ideas here is trying to not eat too much or too little, and trying to get balanced meals to the best of our abilities. One of the things is that when we're in these situations, we may boredom eat. So we might find we're eating more junk food throughout the day. Sometimes for others, it can be really hard to remember to eat when they're having different stressors. It's really important that we stick to what we call square eating. Square eating is the idea of balancing our meals throughout the day. So having 3 solid meals and 2 nourishing snacks spread evenly through the day. Again, this gives us just the momentum to deal with our problems. We know that when we're hungry, we can be more irritable, we can be more cranky, we can be more angry. And so we need to make sure that we're prioritizing eating and taking care of ourselves. That way, when a stressor hits, it's not one more factor we have to deal with. Next one is to avoid mood-altering substances like alcohol and other drugs. So while short-term, some substances might make us feel calmer, long-term, they can actually cause more problems for us, right? So short-term, we might feel a sense of calm. Long-term, it might disrupt our sleep. It might make us more irritable. It might create an additional stressor. So instead, one of the things we recommend is that if you're finding yourself feeling wound up and you're thinking about, saying, using alcohol to calm down, instead try the skills and relaxation exercises we talked about. So trying to use some deep breathing, trying to use that imagery skill Dr. Kelly talked about, trying to do something to facilitate calm without using substances. All right, our next skill is going to be sleep, and our sleep schedule can be totally off at this time. We need to be getting adequate sleep. The recommendation is about 7 to 9 hours per night and to have a consistent sleep schedule. Now, 7 to 9 hours is just the general rule of thumb. You might know you're somebody who needs 10 hours, or you can get by and feel okay and feel rested on 6 hours. The important thing is to kind of know what your body needs. And this can be really hard as a skill to maintain because our routines are far more sedentary than they previously were. And so what can happen with this is that we don't have as much activity and our body can have a great deal of stored energy throughout the day, so that when we do finally go to sleep, it makes it really hard to fall asleep. This can throw off our whole sleep schedule. We're going to talk about the role of exercise in a moment, but what we really want to be sure is that we're not getting too much or too little sleep. It can be really tempting to wake up late or to take long naps, given the lack of activity in your routine. But really, for our long-term health, we want to be sticking to a consistent sleep schedule. When we have a consistent sleep schedule, it's going to help our body feel rested and, again, give us the resources to deal with any kind of crisis or difficult situation. Another thing about a consistent sleep schedule is that it actually helps with our eating schedule, and it helps with physical illness. So if we're getting a consistent sleep schedule, we're going to be able to schedule our meals consistently throughout the day. If we're getting a good sleep schedule, we're going to reduce our susceptibility to physical illness. If we're getting a good sleep schedule and we're feeling rested, we're going to have the energy to engage in that positive activity or to be able to connect with others and feel less isolated. So sleep is really a pillar into order all these other things that are good for taking care of our mind and body. So sleep is really critical at this time. If you're having a really hard time falling asleep, some recommendations we can make is to decrease the distraction. So get electronic devices away from bedtime. Don't watch TV or videos in bed. Try to have a consistent sleep and wake up time. Really try to do things to facilitate going to sleep before you go to bed. So not doing exercise too close to bed, not having any kind of stressful conversations or stressful exercises, really giving yourself a good break before bedtime so that you're in a calmer state. Something else that can be really helpful is doing some relaxation before it's bedtime so that you put yourself in a more restful state. If sleep is really challenging for you, it kind of makes sense now, again, because we have more stored energy, our schedule is off, and so we really want to prioritize getting ourselves in a good sleep schedule. And our last of our please skills is exercise. And so this can be really challenging right now as well, right? Because we have less opportunity to exercise. Gyms are closed, we're practicing social distancing. It might be harder to get around our neighborhoods. It might also be that the just general exercise in our day, walking to classes, walking to see friends that we have on campus aren't happening for us. So we have to try to get really creative with this. So try to think what you can do. Can you watch exercise videos at home or go for a walk in your neighborhood? While we recommend 20 minutes of exercise a day, we also want to strive for the level of activity we had before this pandemic. Right? So for example, if you walked a lot between classes during the day, add that on in addition to your 20 minutes. How long did you spend walking to class? How long were you going around campus? What did you do besides the gym? And if exercise wasn't something or wasn't able to be part of your routine now, is it something that you can embed? Do you have more opportunity for it, even if it might be a little bit harder to implement? Exercise is critical for stress and anxiety. Again, if we think about it and our energy gauge is kind of full and it's causing difficulty with sleep, exercise helps deplete that energy gauge a little bit. Exercise also activates what's called our parasympathetic nervous system. Essentially, what that means is that when that system is activated, it induces a sense of calm and it reduces our vulnerability to negative emotions. So when we think about exercise, it's actually helping us feel better in terms of our emotions and our mental well-being. So it has both those physical and mental benefits to us. So again, all these skills seem really straightforward, but the key with these AB Please skills is that they have to be done daily. Now, if you're feeling really out of whack with all of these things or several of them, it can actually feel really overwhelming to make these changes. That's not the goal. Remember, what we're trying to do here is decrease your stress. So just set small goals. We don't have to change all these things in a day. Slowly pick one thing you want to change. And when you feel like you've got a hold on that, now add a second day. And slowly build yourself until you feel like you're in the routine that you want to be in. This takes a lot of time, and so we really need to have a lot of patience and self-compassion for ourselves here. This is a really unfamiliar, unknown situation, and we just need to give ourselves time to adjust to it and to do the best we can. And one of those things that can be really helpful is remembering and telling yourself, I'm doing the best I can, and here's the opportunity where I can do better or grow more. Remember, the goal of all of these skills that we just talked about is to decrease our vulnerability to intense emotions. So it's to create that buffer from stress. We need to be taking care of ourselves every day in order to do this. One of the other things that we want to talk about, that we talked about, are those distract and improve skills, with those goals of helping us cope once the situation has arisen. As stated, thinking about those things that you can pick that can help you when you're in crisis to distract and to improve the moment, and discarding what doesn't work, just kind of using them as a menu option. At different times, we need different things, so it's good just to have these options in front of us. Okay, so those are all the different skills we're going to talk about today, both crisis survival and helping with our vulnerability to stress. One of the things that you can do that's a really fun activity with this is what's called a distress tolerance kit. And the idea can be to just get like a little travel size bag, like a makeup bag or something like that, and in it put different things that you can use to help you when you're in distress. So examples include essential oils you can smell, silly putty that you can play with, or a stress ball that you can squeeze. Maybe it's like a little crossword puzzle book or a little Sudoku book. Maybe it's the number of friends that you can call so you don't have to use your phone. Or it can be pictures that feel really calming to you. So that way, when you're in crisis, everything's kind of already there for you and you don't have to think about the skill in the moment. And it can be a good activity to do at this time. You can do as much DIY as you want with it. It can be fun, and it can also be really beneficial when you're feeling in crisis. If it feels like you're going through a lot of these skills and you're still struggling and you feel like you want some additional support, please feel free to contact us at CAPS. You can call our main number at 973-761-9500. Thank you, everyone.